Adventure Racers, William Wild Bill Donahue here with Barbara Phipps, fresh off of her finish at the 2021 USAR National Championship race. Barbara, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I had so much fun on that race.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. How was it?
Post-race high. Oh, it was fun. I'm pretty sure my teammates got sick of me saying, "This is so fun," because pretty much the first 12 hours, that was the mode I was in.
Now, you raced with team Lost Texas Grit, and that was a combination of a few different teams, I believe. Tell us about how the team came together.
The team came together very last minute. I think Matt, who's from, oh man, this is going to be bad. I'm trying to remember. Oh, his original team name is Grit and Grind. And he normally races with his sister and a best friend, I think. And he contacted me after seeing a post I'd made on Teammate Finder on the Facebook group and said, "Do you want to do nationals?" And of course I said, yes. And then he said, "Great, let's do it." And this was Thursday. It was on a Thursday, I think. And the cutoff to sign up for nationals was Sunday. Okay. So this was incredibly last minute. And so I had to go get clearance from my husband to make sure he could watch my kids while I go all the way to Wisconsin because I'm on the West Coast. So, yeah, it happened really fast. And then we got a third teammate, Paul Ryan, not, the politician, but a really nice Southern gentleman. And he races under Texas Pride. And for whatever reason, all three of us did not have teammates to race. And since open registration was still open for nationals, we said, let's go for it. We had a quick Zoom call or a chat, I think, to make sure that, we were somewhat of a mix and could function together maybe, because you can tell that on Zoom.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're all Zoom experts now.
Yeah, well, so that's how it kind of came about. And we took pieces of all of our old team names to make Lost Texas Grit.
Because you raced with the Lost Boys at Expedition Oregon, correct?
Yes, yeah, that was our team name.
Yeah, and that was also, Expedition Oregon was also your first adventure race, more or less ever, right? You did like a 6 hour or something?
I did, yeah. So that was, you're right. It was my first real expedition race. I can't say that the 6 hour felt very much like the 4.5 day. But it was a good idea of kind of how the race works in a sense, it's like checkpoints, TA kind of. Because I didn't know any of that going in. So it was a good idea to do a 6 hour just to get a kind of an idea. So this would be my third race, I guess.
Okay. So no racing in between Expedition Oregon and Nationals.
No.
And I guess that open registration was sometime in August. For the race?
Yes, I think it was, the cutoff was exactly 30 days from the race start, maybe something like that. So we had 4 weeks to go from, hi, my name's Barbara, to let's go adventure in the woods for 30 hours together.
At the national championship.
Yeah.
So your training then, had you maintained training from the spring's Expedition Oregon race to September's national championship race?
So I did try to maintain as much as possible. Right when I got off Expedition Oregon, I was so in love with adventure racing that I immediately went on Facebook. I started binge listening to every podcast. And right after Expedition Oregon, I think Randy Erickson had posted a recording of one of the Women of AR's meetings. And so I was listening to that. And I'm like, who are these women? So that's actually how I found out about Women of AR. So I went on to Women of AR because I was like, yeah, I definitely need a mentor. And they had talked in that podcast about their mentoring program. So I went on there and I found Stephanie Ross. And she, in our very first meeting, said, you need to just plan as though you're going to nationals. And I'm thinking, this lady is crazy. And she just said, well, there's always going to be someone, there's going to be a team that has an injury or something is going to come up, and that team is not going to care how slow you are. They're going to care that all of their hard work, they still get to do that race in whatever capacity that might mean. And she was so right. Because I think even like, yeah, there always is. I think a week before, even after I had we'd signed up under Lost Texas Grit, I remember occasionally seeing people saying, lost a teammate, can someone race with us in nationals? And I was like, well, that's really last minute. But Stephanie was so right. If you had just gone into it planning, I will be there, then I had two separate opportunities aside from the one that I had already taken to actually be there. So she's a very smart person.
And there was a question on a Facebook group where someone who was at nationals sort of watching, I think, the teams finish and had done some racing, but was really curious how you sort of go from, being, well, first of all, like, how do you become the elite of the elite, right? And I think we're all like, I don't know, like, how do you do that? And you can let me know how I can become as elite as you. But there also was that going from, someone who does some adventure racing to being someone who can adventure race at nationals. And so considering, I think, your adventure race journey started what, like October of 2020, if I'm not mistaken, or was it before that? But within the past 2 years.
Yeah, so 2020 was when I started training for Expedition Oregon after watching the Amazon Prime The World's Toughest Race. Yeah. So it's been almost exactly a year since the idea of I want to do that to I'm actually doing it, which is really so crazy to say.
and doing it at two of the premier races in the country.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it was so fun to be. I didn't realize when I was doing Expedition Oregon what a big deal it was, because I was still just really naive as to adventure racing in general. And yeah, I mean, I didn't even realize how few there are to race like that, right? Because I got back off the race and I was like, I need more. And so I went to go find more, and there were none. Not on the West Coast, at least. And my heart just broke. I was like, I have to wait a whole year before I get to do a race like that again. Oh, it was rough. But yeah, there's just not, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, we were talking about how you basically went, within a year. You've done two of the premier races in the United States, right? Expedition Oregon and now nationals. Right. And there's people out there who are like, oh, what do I need to do to get to nationals?
Well, we didn't technically qualify because we were just a mix of teams. So technically we didn't qualify. We had to wait till open registration. And I don't think I'm the person to ask to how to get there to qualify.
Well, and actually, just to interject, the way that qualifications are going to happen next year, they are going to change, and people can see those at the USARA website. But basically, there's going to be more of a regional champion who will qualify to go to nationals, and there's certain roll downs that come from that. But there still will be an open registration. I mean, a lot of it just depends on how many teams kind of fit various criteria, and then what's left. So because it is a fairly competitive race, right? I mean, it's it's designed to be a tough, difficult race that that to really flesh out who the national champion is, right? Yeah. So qualifying is one thing, but for us, like mid-packers, right? How do we sort of get ourselves the skill set and the confidence to think, okay, yes, like, maybe I can qualify, or maybe I can do an open registration, but nationals is a race where I can race at, right? What's that experience like? How does one sort of go about doing that?
Well, there's always, I think people really focus a lot on the physical aspect of adventure racing, but honestly, I am not a very fit person. A year ago, I could not run for more than 3 or 4 minutes without really hurting. So I mean, there's only so much you can do in a certain space of time, right? Well, at least me. I don't know. Maybe there are people out there that can, just become the elite in 1 year from being couch potato to not. But I can't. So I think there is a lot of emphasis put on that, but I really do feel like adventure racing is a lot of experience, right? Like navigation is something that I don't know if you ever stop learning. I certainly don't, but obviously that's, but I have heard from some of those elite teams that this is something that you grow into. And I guess that's, one of the biggest things to notice is that in these really tough competition races, you don't ever see a rookie team make it to the top. And there's a reason why. It's because to learn how to work as a team together, that takes time. To learn how to really navigate and make wise choices and sleep deprivation, all of those things take so much time. They take a lot of practice and a lot of learning. And to top it all off, every race is completely different. So everything you learned in the race before may not even be something you can use in the race going forward. Maybe some bits and pieces, but I really do feel like mentally, that's where this race that's what separates those amazing athletes to people winning nationals, right? It's definitely a combo when you're winning nationals, because those guys are wow. I mean, I'm sure to them a 30-hour race is like, this is a sprint.
Well, they do race it hard.
Yes, they do.
Race a lot harder. They're moving a lot harder than they are in like an expedition race.
Yes.
That's for sure. But even, and I think the mental aspect that you're talking about is so interesting, because a lot of it for me in my background, and I've been racing for a while, is like mentally, it's almost like I'm out of it if I haven't gotten the training in, right? But I think it's also interesting to think about it like, okay, like I do this training, but like mentally, what do I need to do, right? And, experience is one thing, trying to do as many races as possible, and then team dynamics, and especially when you just meet people new. So then, yeah, just what do you think, someone who's only done a few races, right? Because like like me. I did, yeah, like how can you mentally prepare? Like even when you were talking with Stephanie Ross about, and she's like, no, think like you don't have a team, but you got to have the mindset you're going to nationals. Right.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Like, what's your sort of preparation? Like, what did you sort of mentally think about? Hey, I've done 2 races. Now I'm going to go do nationals. Right. Like, how do you mentally sort of prepare for that besides the time you can find to get out on your bike or run through the woods?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, so, earlier you said training wise, that physical aspect, mentally, they kind of go together, right? So if you don't have that physical background, you feel like you're not prepared. And in all 3 of the races that I've done so far, I really do feel physically like I'm not where I wanted to be. And I'm starting to really wonder if that's just basically how a regular person is always going to feel going into this, right? Like, it's not likely that I will ever learn to race as fast as Mary Chandler. That's just probably not in me, right? But when I go out and I train, there are a lot of training sessions where, and I've gone and done fitness for a really long time. I love working out, right? So, but adventure racing really did change my mindset when I'm out there training. So first off, it's a lot more fun because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to help me just totally shred some single track out there, which by the way, I do just in a really not traditional way. I fall off that bike like you wouldn't believe. We're really grateful for all of you though.
Seen some pictures of your bruised legs, I think.
Yeah, that's the only time I've shown a picture of my legs, actually. But so a really good example of this would be when I went on a bike ride and a piece to my bike had fallen off on a previous ride. And I knew this going into that bike ride. It was on order. I was riding my husband's bike because my bike's back wheel had already fallen off, and it's a big, it was a really expensive mistake, actually. But, so my bike is in the garage without a wheel, and I'm riding my husband's bike, and there's a bolt that keeps the pedals in place that had fallen off on a previous bike ride. And the pedal had fallen off on that ride as well. And I managed to kind of fix it, but I couldn't find that piece. So it was on order and I was determined to go and get this ride in. I had just started coaching, online coaching sessions with Bend Racing. And so I really didn't want to poon out on this workout. And I had nationals coming, you know, and I just really didn't want to be stuck on a stationary bike that day. And so in my mind, I had really tightened that pedal on well enough that it should last the 45-minute bike ride I was planning on doing. And I had in my mind how fast I was going to go, right? Because, you know, when you're doing a regular training session, you do kind of set those, this is how fast I'm going to go. And when I get up to that hill, I'm going to really, you know, kick it in to another level. And anyway, the pedal started falling off about 3 miles in. And I put it back on and I'm, you know, cycle for another couple miles and then fall off again. And I was getting so irritated. That's annoying just in and of itself, but back at home, I had a baby that only was napping for X amount of time, right? I was pretty sure he was not going to sleep for much longer than about an hour. And my husband had meetings and he was working from home. And so there's all this external pressure to finish this bike ride.
Yeah.
So I get to the base of a massive hill and I just, again, it falls off and it's kind of a dangerous thing to be. I wasn't on gravel or anything like that. I was on a road and it's not a busy road, but there are cars that go on there. So, you know, you don't really want your pedal going flying as there's a truck behind you. So I finally was just like, oh, I can't take this anymore. So I called my husband and I said, is there any chance you could come get me? Which I don't do that very often. I don't like quitting on a workout. But it had already been 45 minutes and I was almost halfway. So he said, yeah, I can. I don't have a meeting yet, but I will have to wake Taryn up, the baby. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to pack the baby in the car. He's going to have to get the 2 girls in their car seat and come and get me. And so I just said, you know what? It's fine. I'll just keep going. And if I'm not done by the time Taryn wakes up from his nap, then we'll talk about you coming to get me. So I again try and put that pedal on and I just eventually walked up that really steep part of the hill and there's a really long gentle downgrade after that. So at the top of the hill, I got sick of that stupid pedal. I put it in my pack and I decided I was just going to have fun with this ride. It didn't go the way I wanted to. I was not getting like the cardiovascular workout that I wanted to, but I was just like, you know what? Stuff like this happens on an adventure race all the time. And sometimes your training isn't going to be on paper. It's not going to be that physical training that you went into that session thinking it. And so it was like, well, we can turn this into a different kind of training. So I decided I was going to have fun and turn my massive mountain bike into a balance bike, you know, because little toddlers do it all the time. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so hard. It's really tiring to get your mountain bike go. I don't know how those little kids go as fast as they do. I mean, I was cruising on the downhill, but then it goes back up to being, you know, dips and stuff. And yeah, it was a lot of work, but it was fun, right? Because I just decided, you know, forget it. This is, you know, again, these things happen on a race and you can either let it ruin the training session, ruin the race, or you can just let it, all right, well, let's find a different way. I still had 2 wheels. I still had a seat to sit on. I still had my legs. So there was still a way to get home on my own power. And so I think sometimes with these races, you just have to really remember there's always a way to keep going. You just have to take a minute to figure out how, right? So.
Right. No, that's great. That's great mental training. I mean, it's uncanny you say this. I had an experience this morning. I was out for a bike ride in a place I hadn't been before. I got lost and I had a 10 o'clock meeting that like, okay, like, I need to get back to my car, home and on my computer by 10 o'clock and I'm lost in the woods. And
it's so stressful. I love it.
And then like, you know, I was getting so frustrated. I mean, trails would just all of a sudden just turn into overgrowth. And I'm like, I got to turn around and, finally I'm like,
Yeah.
I just there's a road, let me get to that, and I can get from that back to my car, and I'm good to go. And I was only a few minutes late. But yeah, it's like that. I got to stop, take a breath. Where am I? Orient. Okay, what am I going to do here? I'm low on time. Find the road.
Yeah.
You've got two wheels and a saddle. You can do something with it, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That it's exactly like that. And again, that was great mental training for an adventure race, because there will be moments where you're like, shoot, I've run out of time. I've got all these checkpoints to get to. I'm lost. And sometimes, and we talked about this a lot after nationals, because we did have a team meltdown at some point about 8 hours before cutoff.
Uh-huh.
And we all decided after the race that would have been a really great time for us to just take a deep breath, put a timeout on the race so that you can mentally regroup and address the situation with a slightly different mind, right? Because that panic that sets in, that stress of I've got to get home to this meeting, that's exactly what it feels like to be out on an adventure race. I've got 3 hours before every minute I'm late is eating into every checkpoint I worked so hard to get.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's just, I think it's just maybe a mindset of just deciding. And I think I've heard Jason Magnus saying in a podcast somewhere that when you're racing, you always have to find the reason to stay in. So instead of always looking for a way out of this race, you're reversing that and saying, how can I keep racing?
Yeah.
And I definitely have noticed with myself, I've started to try in training sessions to keep doing that more. How can I keep going on in this training session? And I don't know why, but for some reason, in all of the races I've done, except for the 6 hour, oddly enough, the shortest race I did, I was most nervous about getting to the finish line in time. And all the other ones, I knew I was going to finish that race. I didn't think I was going to get on the podium. I didn't think I was going to get all the checkpoints, but I knew I was going to finish that race.
Yeah.
So going into it knowing I will find what I have to find in myself to keep going. If I have to stick a teammate on a bike, like belly down and drag them through, I think I would try and do that, right? I would definitely be the team member that's like, you know what, that gash, it's going to keep bleeding, but you have 24 hours before you have to get stitches. It's not too late. We'll bandage you up and keep going. So maybe not the best teammate in that situation.
Yeah, maybe a little wilderness first aid course, and
I'm
know
not
what
saying like, yeah, I'm not saying leave it, but definitely for me, if I had a pretty deep gash in my leg, I'd definitely be like, well, let's put a Band-Aid on it because we can keep racing. I have 24 hours before they can't stitch me up. So.
Sounds like a duct tape job to me. If it's that deep. So yeah, this idea of keep going, right? Whether it's a pedal malfunction or find the reason to stay in the race. You said your team had that sort of meltdown about 22 hours into the adventure race. How did you keep going?
We just did. It was a bit of a struggle. So partly what had happened, and I was having an internal battle as well at this point, because we had gone for, we went and did a 23-mile single track, but it was really tough, and I am not a mountain biker. So it was super fun, by the way, but it took way too long. So by the time we got to our next transition, we were thinking, shoot, that ate up so much of our race. And you're already tired by that point and trying to figure out what's the best way. How do we get, we needed a cash cow, right? We could just get all the checkpoints. And I think we just weren't really communicating very well. And for me, I just was like, well, let's just do it, right? We'd made a decision to do a certain orienteering section. And so it was like, let's just do this and get it over with really quickly. And I know that all my teammates were really worried about me being able to get to the finish line in time because I had taken so long on that mountain biking trail. And so there was also this concern of how are we going to get back in time if that took her like 10, 11 hours. So there was definitely that contributing to all of that panic. Like, if it's going to take us that long to get here, how are we going to get back? So I think we just kind of, at some point, in orienteering, as you do, you get a little lost. And so we got a couple of checkpoints, and then we decided to head back and see if we could figure out a way to make sure we leave us enough time to get to the finish line. I don't know how my teammates kept going. For me, I just knew I wanted to get those checkpoints done and over with as quickly as possible. And I was also, the navigator was like, no, Barbara, you can do this. I promise. If I leave you 4 hours on this route, you will be able to do it. So the whole time we're doing the orienteering, instead of really focusing on full-on orienteering, I was also getting a little stressed over, can I do it? He thinks I can. He's really overestimated, right? Like that, that massive self-doubt definitely hit me there. But by the time we got back to, after we'd finished getting some checkpoints and we got back to the TA, I guess I calmed down enough, and plus I knew that we were heading towards the finish line soon, and we'd found a much faster route. So I don't know, that adrenaline of here comes the finish line had kind of kicked in, and I don't know, you just keep going. What else are you gonna do, right? Like if your teammates really want to do this section in the race, you just have to go and do it, because what else are you gonna do? I mean, in my mind, there's never an option to say, nope, I'm not doing that and I'm done. Like that's just not how I go into these races, because that to me feels like madness. Yeah. And we had a lot of fun on that orienteering course. I mean, they were a little lost. We were looking for a checkpoint. I was like, you guys do that nap thing. I'm going to go pee. So, I'm sitting there peeing and I go, oh, it's like right eye level with where I am. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm not even sure how, because it was kind of, it's really wooded in that area and kind of hard to see that checkpoint. We would have been wandering around a little bit longer because we were about to walk straight past it.
Wow.
And so I was just like, it was dead center right there. They're like, where? Because where they were standing, they really couldn't see it. Yeah. And so I was just like, guys, hold on. I will show you in a minute. But I think that was all of our favorite checkpoint to get, just because it was like, just, how do you find a checkpoint that way? I'm just magical, I guess.
Checkpoint because I went pee.
I know, right?
So what are some of the other highlights of the race? What were some of the sections that you thought were just awesome? I wasn't able to be there, but some of the pictures and videos that I've seen, it just looked like a beautiful place.
Oh, the whole race was so gorgeous. I'm not kidding when I was just so happy to be out there. It was so fun. And I love how in adventure racing, they are inclusive with the newbies, right? Like I never felt like the elite athletes were like, what are you doing here? There was never a moment on that dark, really rough trail in the middle of the night as all these pro teams are passing us. No one ever said, they never really blew us off. They said, hey, they were always, if they were really, booking it, they would just say, hey, as they're biking past, right? And we would make sure we got off the trail for them because, I was already off my bike half the time anyway. But there was so much, it was beautiful, yes. And it was a great adventure in and of itself. But I just loved the atmosphere that all of the racers bring to the race. And, you're in the middle of the night. And there was a moment when I jokingly had told Bend Racing first team, not the Bend Racing Blue Jay team, but the Bend Racing team. So it was Dan and Chelsea and Chris were all standing there. I think they were doing something, fixing bikes or something, I don't know. And so we were passing by them. And so I jokingly tell Dan, hey, can I get a tow? And instantly this team, they couldn't tell I was joking. First off. And so instantly the vibe from this team was like, oh shoot, they're in trouble, kind of like, okay, how can we help them? And then he's like saying, do you need some food? What right? Like they didn't offer to tow me, obviously. but they went from, hey, how's it going on the trail, to do you need food? Right? Like, who's broken, trying to figure it out. And I just instantly started laughing and said, no, I'm totally joking. We're all good. You guys do your thing, right? And so we just carried on. But I mean, that's kind of the atmosphere that you really do get out there on the trail. And it doesn't matter what team it is, they're all really friendly like that. And I'm certain had somebody been actually injured, or if someone really was in trouble that deep into the woods, they would have stopped to make sure we had what we needed to get out. And I just love that. And I really love, honestly, how encouraging every single person I've met in adventure racing is. And they're always telling me, you can do this, you can do this. And it helps to hear that from people who actually can do it. You're like, wait, maybe I can do it. So
yeah, well, and that's why at the national championship they have the Spirit Awards that go out to teams that sort of demonstrate that camaraderie, that team spirit beyond just their own team. But the follow up with the Ben story, I believe it was them that their bike essentially was inoperable, and they got back to the TA and they said, yeah, like we're out, we don't have a bike, and some other teams like, we just had a person drop, like
again, I mean, that's so great. They didn't have to offer up their bike, but it was like, how can we help you stay in this race, right? We want you to keep racing. And I really do feel that throughout the entire race. That's how it is. It's how can we all keep racing? It's like, yes, this is my team. And the elite athletes, they're definitely competitive and they want to keep going. But there is still always that feeling of, we want you to do as well as you can do, just as much as we want to do well. And I find that so inspiring and so welcoming. I've fallen head over heels in love with this sport, just and the people who are doing it, and the directors and the volunteers. It's just such a great community. I love it. I want to always be adventure racing now.
So what's the next race? What's next on the agenda?
So I've got Buff Betty coming up, which is an all-female race in Virginia. And this is the last one that I have been allowed to travel out of the state for. My husband said after I signed up, because I actually signed up for Buff Betty first, and he was fine with that. And then I signed up for nationals, and he looked at me and he's like, yes, but you can't do them all. And I said, what do you mean I can't do them all? And he's like, you just can't be going out of town every weekend, right? So, I mean, he had to take 2 days off of work just so that I could race and so he could focus on watching our kids. But so that's my next race coming up. And I am planning on doing Expedition Oregon 2022. Hence why I started doing Ben Racing's online coaching program, just because I want to make sure that we actually can do Expedition Oregon. And I'm trying to come up and develop my own team. So lots of fun things.
Oh, that's great. That's
yeah,
great.
It's super fun.
Yeah, well,
so
thank you so much for talking with us, providing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
it's been
and
great.
Congratulations on completing your first year in adventure racing.
Woo! It's been so fun. It's been an adventure, life-changing. I really have learned that we are so capable if we just allow ourselves to be. So if you take anything away from anything I've said ever, please let it be that. You really are capable. This sport really is for everyone and everybody, if you just allow yourself to be capable and do it.
Excellent. Excellent advice. Thank you.